Hey guys, tonight we step softly through the silent doorways of the world's lost libraries, where shelves once stretched farther than candlelight could reach, where the scent of papyrus, parchment, and fresh ink filled cool stone halls, and where thousands upon thousands of voices from the past patiently waited for curious hands to unroll another scroll. You are about to wander into places that no longer exist, following the faint echoes of forgotten readers and long-vanished scribes. Fair warning, though, you probably won't survive this as an ancient librarian, because one unexpected rainstorm, a hungry mouse, or an absent-minded apprentice could undo months of careful work. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know your location and your local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your footsteps echo quietly across smooth stone. The doorway behind you closes with a soft wooden thud, leaving the busy outside world somewhere far away. Ahead stretches a vast reading hall lit by dozens of oil lamps. Their warm glow flickers gently against rows of shelves that seem to disappear into the darkness above. For a moment, everything is perfectly still. Not empty, simply waiting. The air carries the unmistakable scent of ink, dried reeds, polished wood, beeswax, and old paper. Or rather, papyrus and parchment, because paper itself has not yet become common across much of the ancient world. You slowly reach toward the nearest shelf. Instead of books with colorful spines, you find tightly rolled scrolls resting inside carefully labeled compartments. Tiny tags hang from their ends, so librarians can locate the correct text without unrolling every single one. Thankfully. Imagine searching for your favorite novel by opening 5,000 scrolls one after another. Even the most patient librarian might politely request a vacation. One of the best established historical facts is that ancient libraries organized their collections with remarkable care. Whether using clay tablets, papyrus scrolls, bamboo slips, or parchment manuscripts, librarians developed cataloging systems to help scholars locate specific works among thousands of documents. Knowledge, it turns out, has always required organization. Otherwise, history becomes one very untidy attic. You continue walking between towering shelves. Some scrolls contain poetry. Others preserve legal codes, astronomical observations, medical treatments, religious ceremonies, mathematics, maps, royal decrees, farming advice, stories, songs, letters. Entire civilizations quietly resting inside carefully wrapped bundles. You begin realizing something remarkable. A library is not simply a building. It is thousands of conversations waiting patiently across time. Every scroll represents someone who decided that an idea deserved to survive beyond a single lifetime. That is an astonishing act of optimism. Near one corner of the hall, several scribes sit cross-legged beside low wooden desks. Each holds a reed pen. Small bowls of ink rest nearby. One reads carefully from an older scroll, while another copies every word with extraordinary concentration. There are no printers, no photocopiers, no digital backups. Every copy depends entirely on steady hands. One sneeze at precisely the wrong moment, and your paragraph suddenly develops unexpected artistic qualities. The apprentice beside the master scribe looks slightly nervous, reasonably so. Historians still argue whether the greatest danger to ancient libraries came from dramatic disasters like fires and invasions, or from the much quieter threats of moisture, insects, mold, and simple neglect over centuries. The dramatic stories capture attention. The quiet dangers often proved just as destructive. A senior librarian walks gracefully through the aisles. He carries no impressive crown, no jeweled sword, only a small wax tablet covered with notes. Every few moments he pauses to inspect a shelf, a missing scroll, a damaged label, a manuscript awaiting repair. His work resembles tending a vast garden. Instead of flowers, ideas. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that some ancient libraries reportedly attached small tags to scrolls, identifying not only their titles, but occasionally their opening words as well, making it easier to distinguish similar works stored side by side. Ancient search engines required considerably more walking. On the bright side, your daily step count would have been excellent. You wander farther into the collection. The silence feels comforting rather than strict. Occasionally, a scroll gently unrolls across a reading table. A scholar murmurs softly while comparing two different texts. Someone quietly sharpens a reed pen. Wax lamps crackle almost imperceptibly. Nothing rushes. Knowledge keeps its own pace. You stop beside a window overlooking a peaceful courtyard. Olive trees sway gently in the breeze. Birds land briefly on a stone fountain before flying away again. Even libraries needed gardens. After hours spent reading philosophy, mathematics, or history, stepping into fresh air probably felt wonderfully refreshing. Besides, ancient librarians likely appreciated birds, provided they stayed outside. A pigeon wandering through the archives would quickly become everyone's least favorite assistant. You smile at the thought. The shelves continue almost endlessly. You begin imagining the countless people who once visited places like this. Young students eager to learn, experienced scholars searching obscure texts, travelers carrying manuscripts from distant kingdoms, royal officials preserving laws, poets hoping future generations might remember their verses. None of them expected you. Yet here you are, quietly sharing the same aisles. The realization feels strangely comforting. Across thousands of years, curiosity remains wonderfully familiar. As evening light softens beyond the windows, the lamps inside the library glow a little brighter. Long shadows stretch across the stone floor. The scribes carefully roll finished manuscripts before placing them into protective cases. The librarian makes one final walk between the shelves, gently straightening a scroll that has slipped slightly out of place. Order restored. Tomorrow will bring another day of copying, reading, repairing, and preserving. You leave the great hall quietly, understanding that this peaceful building is only the beginning of your journey. Beyond the next doorway waits an even older world, where libraries were not filled with scrolls at all, but with thousands upon thousands of clay tablets patiently impressed by reeds into wet earth, preserving the first written voices humanity ever chose to save.
The wooden doors of the scroll library close softly behind you. For a few quiet moments, you still carry the scent of papyrus and ink on your clothes. Then the air begins to change. It grows warmer, drier. Dust drifts lazily across a wide, sunlit plain where two great rivers wind through the land like shimmering ribbons of silver. Ahead, enormous mud brick walls rise from the earth. Palm trees sway beside canals. Merchants guide donkeys through busy streets. Children laugh somewhere beyond an open marketplace. You have arrived in ancient Mesopotamia. Long before shelves of parchment and towering bookcases, knowledge here took a very different form. It weighed considerably more. You step through a broad gateway into a scribal school. The room is surprisingly cool despite the afternoon heat outside. Instead of scroll racks, low wooden tables fill the chamber. Small baskets hold lumps of fresh clay gathered from nearby riverbanks. Rows of young apprentices kneel quietly, each holding a sharpened reed stylus. No one reaches for ink. There isn't any. The clay itself is the page. One of the best established historical facts is that the earliest known libraries in Mesopotamia collected thousands of cuneiform tablets made from clay. Scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into damp clay with reed styluses before drying the tablets in the sun or baking them for greater durability. Books in this world begin as mud. There is something wonderfully humble about that. The instructor walks slowly between the students. He pauses beside one apprentice whose wedges have wandered just a little too enthusiastically across the tablet. The teacher gently taps the edge with his stylus. The student sighs, very carefully smooths the clay flat again, and starts over. Fortunately, wet clay forgives mistakes much better than permanent ink. Modern keyboards might secretly envy that feature. You kneel beside a finished tablet resting on a wooden shelf. It fits comfortably in both hands. Tiny wedge-shaped symbols cover every surface with astonishing precision. Each mark is small. Together they tell stories, record harvests, preserve laws, describe stars, list trade goods, or copy ancient myths. Some tablets are no larger than your palm. Others resemble sturdy paving stones. Ancient librarians, you realize, developed impressive arm muscles. Shelving several thousand clay tablets is less library work and slightly more strength training. A senior scribe notices your fascination. He smiles politely before carrying you deeper into the archive. Here, rows of baked clay tablets stand neatly arranged inside wooden cupboards and woven baskets. Small labels identify different collections, business accounts, temple records, royal correspondence, poetry, mathematics, medical instructions, astronomical observations. Nothing appears random. Organization already matters. Historians still argue whether the earliest Mesopotamian archives should always be considered true libraries, or whether many functioned primarily as administrative record offices before evolving into broader centers of learning. The distinction can become surprisingly blurry. After all, today's grocery receipt could become tomorrow's historical treasure, especially if historians are having a particularly exciting week. The scribe carefully removes one tablet from its shelf. Its edges have been worn smooth through years of handling. He gently brushes away a thin layer of dust before handing it to you. The clay feels cool despite the warm afternoon. Its weight surprises you. Knowledge here possesses literal substance. Drop one on your foot, and history becomes painfully memorable. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that some clay tablets were stored inside protective clay envelopes. The original message was sealed within an outer layer of clay, bearing additional inscriptions, helping verify authenticity and discourage tampering. Ancient security systems were wonderfully solid. Breaking into confidential documents required considerably more commitment than forgetting a password. You continue walking through the archive. Shelves rise almost to the ceiling. Everywhere you look, orderly stacks of clay tablets wait patiently. Unlike fragile papyrus, baked clay survives remarkable hardships. Fire that destroys wooden buildings often hardens the tablets even further. It is one of history's strange little ironies. Sometimes disaster accidentally preserves knowledge. Sometimes it erases it forever. The difference can depend upon astonishingly small details. Nearby, several scribes prepare fresh clay. One mixes river water carefully into dry earth. Another kneads the mixture until perfectly smooth. A third shapes neat rectangular tablets ready for writing. Every stage requires patience. No one hurries. Mistakes made now remain visible for centuries. Outside, the sounds of the bustling city drift softly through open windows. Donkeys bray, merchants bargain, potters shape spinning clay. Children chase each other through dusty streets. Inside, however, another rhythm quietly unfolds. Press, lift, press, lift. Thousands of wedge marks gradually become another page of history. You notice a young apprentice studying an older tablet with intense concentration. His lips move silently while tracing each symbol. Learning cuneiform demands persistence. There are hundreds of signs to master. You briefly feel grateful for modern alphabets. 26 letters seem wonderfully economical. The apprentice eventually smiles. He has successfully copied the passage. His teacher nods approvingly. No applause follows, only quiet satisfaction. Libraries have always celebrated small victories. As afternoon sunlight begins shifting toward evening, workers carry newly dried tablets into storage rooms where they will rest beside countless others. Some may remain untouched for decades. Others will be borrowed tomorrow morning by scholars, priests, merchants, or royal officials. Every tablet waits patiently. Ideas, unlike fruit, improve remarkably well with age. You pause one final time before leaving the archive. The shelves stand silent, yet each clay tablet contains a voice still capable of speaking across thousands of years. That thought lingers as you step back into the fading sunlight. Ahead, beyond the city's walls, another extraordinary collection awaits. A royal king will soon gather one of the greatest libraries the ancient world has ever known, filling palace rooms with tens of thousands of clay tablets in a bold attempt to preserve all human knowledge. His name is Ashurbanipal, and tomorrow you will quietly walk through his astonishing archive.
The evening breeze carries a fine veil of desert dust behind you as the scribal school slowly disappears into the distance. The clay tablets, the patient apprentices, and the steady rhythm of reed styluses remain fresh in your mind. Now the road grows wider, stronger, royal. Stone reliefs begin appearing beside the pathway, carved with lions, winged guardians, and long processions of soldiers marching with quiet confidence. Ahead rises one of the greatest cities of the ancient Near East, Nineveh. Its towering walls catch the first golden light of morning. Massive gates decorated with colossal winged bulls seem to watch every traveler entering the city. You instinctively lower your voice, not because anyone asks you to, because places filled with history often encourage quiet footsteps. Beyond the palace gates, servants move calmly through spacious courtyards, while scribes carry carefully racked bundles beneath shaded walkways. Somewhere nearby, fountains splash softly into carved stone basins. You have entered the palace of King Ashurbanipal. Unlike many rulers remembered mainly for battles and conquest, Ashurbanipal also possessed something rather unexpected. He genuinely loved books. Well, clay tablets. They are considerably heavier than books, but the enthusiasm remains the same. One of the best established historical facts is that King Ashurbanipal of Assyria assembled one of the largest known libraries of the ancient world at Nineveh during the 7th century BCE. His collection eventually contained tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets covering literature, astronomy, medicine, religion, mathematics, royal correspondence, and administrative records. His ambition was breathtaking: collect everything worth knowing. You follow a palace official through a long corridor lined with carved stone reliefs depicting royal hunts and military victories. Eventually, the hallway opens into a quieter wing. Immediately, the atmosphere changes. The sounds of the palace fade. Instead, you hear only soft footsteps and the occasional gentle tap of clay meeting wood. Rows upon rows of shelves stretch across several rooms. Unlike the modest archive you visited yesterday, this place feels immense. Every shelf supports carefully organized tablets. Each room specializes in particular subjects. Healing texts occupy one chamber, astronomical observations another, religious rituals, epic poetry, royal decrees, even dictionaries translating words between different ancient languages. Knowledge has become an empire of its own. A senior librarian greets you politely before lifting a remarkably large tablet onto a reading stand. Its surface contains densely packed cuneiform writing from edge to edge.
you immediately understand why reading tables were necessary. Holding this in your lap for an afternoon would certainly qualify as exercise. The librarian smiles knowingly. Perhaps every visitor reacts the same way. Historians still argue whether Ashurbanipal personally read many of the texts within his collection, or whether later royal inscriptions somewhat exaggerated the king's scholarly reputation. Either way, his determination to preserve knowledge left an extraordinary legacy. Sometimes even ambitious collectors accidentally become heroes of history. The librarian leads you toward a particularly famous section. Here rests one of humanity's oldest surviving literary masterpieces, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Its story had already existed for centuries before Ashurbanipal's scribes copied it into the royal collection. Without those copies, large portions of the tale might have disappeared forever. You gently trace the wedge-shaped symbols with your eyes. A hero, a friendship, a great flood. Questions about life and mortality. People separated by 4,000 years still recognize these themes. Some stories refuse to grow old. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that many tablets in Ashurbanipal's library carried ownership inscriptions declaring they belonged to the king and warning future readers from removing them. Ancient version, "This book belongs to me." Modern version, "Please return borrowed books." Apparently, humanity has never fully trusted book borrowers. The palace scribes remain astonishingly busy. Fresh tablets continue arriving from across the empire. Messengers deliver copies from temples. Governors send official reports. Scholars contribute rare texts discovered in distant cities. The library constantly grows. Ashurbanipal reportedly ordered officials to search widely for valuable writings, ensuring important knowledge reached Nineveh whenever possible. It resembles an enormous puzzle slowly assembling itself. Every new tablet fills another small gap. Nearby, a young apprentice carefully brushes dust from several shelves using soft woven cloth. Another checks clay labels attached to storage baskets. Organization remains as important as collection. After all, possessing 20,000 tablets becomes considerably less useful if nobody remembers where they belong. You briefly imagine asking, "Excuse me, where is that medical tablet about headaches?" only to receive directions involving 6 corridors, 3 storage rooms, and a left turn at the astronomy department. Large libraries have always rewarded good maps. Outside the palace windows, swallows dart gracefully through the warm afternoon sky. Inside, sunlight filters gently across rows of clay tablets. Dust motes drift lazily through beams of golden light. The entire archive feels peaceful, safe, permanent. Yet history quietly reminds you that permanence can be surprisingly fragile. Years later, enemies would attack Nineveh. Buildings would burn, walls would collapse, the empire itself would fall. And strangely enough, the fire that consumed the wooden palace baked countless clay tablets harder than before, preserving many of them beneath the ruins for archaeologists to rediscover thousands of years later. One of history's greatest libraries survived because disaster unintentionally strengthened its pages. The irony is impossible to ignore. As evening approaches, the chief librarian carefully returns the Epic of Gilgamesh tablet to its shelf. He pauses for just a moment, resting one hand gently upon the collection. Perhaps he believes these texts will last forever. Perhaps he simply hopes they will. Either way, his careful work echoes through thousands of years until it reaches you. You leave the palace quietly as the sun sinks behind Nineveh's mighty walls. Ahead lies another library whose name has become almost legendary, a place spoken of with wonder even today, a place filled not with clay tablets, but with countless scrolls gathered from every corner of the ancient Mediterranean. Tomorrow, the sea breeze of Egypt will welcome you to the astonishing and mysterious Library of Alexandria.
Morning arrives with the scent of salt carried gently inland by the Mediterranean breeze. Nineveh fades behind you like a distant dream, its clay tablets resting quietly beneath centuries yet to come. Ahead, sunlight glitters across a magnificent harbor crowded with merchant ships from every corner of the known world. Tall masts sway lazily against a brilliant blue sky. Sailors call to one another as ropes creak softly in the wind. Gulls circle overhead with the confidence of birds who clearly believe every fishing boat exists entirely for their convenience. To be fair, they may have a point. You walk along broad stone streets where voices mingle in Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, and countless other languages. The city feels alive with trade, ideas, and endless curiosity. This is Alexandria. Founded by Alexander the Great, it would later become one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. At the heart of that ambition stood a library whose reputation would echo through history. One of the best established historical facts is that the Library of Alexandria sought to collect works from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Under the rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty, scholars gathered literature, science, philosophy, mathematics, geography, medicine, and countless other subjects into an extraordinary scholarly collection. The dream was breathtakingly simple. If humanity knew it, Alexandria wanted to preserve it. You climb a wide staircase leading toward a grand complex known as the Museion, a place dedicated to the Muses, where scholars studied, debated, wrote, and taught. The library itself forms part of this larger community. Columns rise high above polished stone floors. Sunlight filters through open courtyards where olive trees offer welcome shade. Fountains murmur quietly nearby. The atmosphere feels less like a warehouse for scrolls and more like a living university. A librarian greets arriving scholars before carefully recording newly delivered manuscripts. Nearby, assistants gently unroll scrolls to inspect their condition. Some require repair, others need copying. Every text receives careful attention. Nothing important is left to chance. Or, at least, that is the hope. You enter the great reading hall. Shelves curve gently around the walls. Instead of books, thousands upon thousands of papyrus scrolls rest inside wooden pigeonhole compartments. Tiny labels hang neatly from each one. The sight is almost overwhelming. Knowledge surrounds you in every direction. It feels impossible that anyone could ever read everything stored here. Perhaps that was never the goal. Perhaps simply knowing the ideas had survived was enough. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria ever contained the enormous numbers of scrolls described by some ancient writers, or whether later generations exaggerated its size and fame. Whatever the exact total, few doubt that it ranked among the greatest intellectual centers of the ancient world. Numbers may be debated, its influence is not. A group of scholars gathers around a large wooden table. One compares different versions of an ancient poem. Another carefully calculates astronomical observations. A physician copies medical notes while quietly discussing anatomy with a colleague. Ideas move constantly from one mind to another. The library breathes. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that ships arriving in Alexandria were sometimes searched for books. If officials discovered valuable manuscripts, the library reportedly borrowed them for copying before returning the duplicates, or, according to some ancient accounts, occasionally returning the copies while keeping the originals. Imagine customs officers asking, "Anything to declare?" "Just some olives." "And 7 philosophical masterpieces?" That inspection might take a little longer. You continue deeper into the collection. The scent of papyrus mixes with cedarwood, beeswax, and fresh ink. Copyists sit patiently beside open windows where natural light makes delicate writing easier. Their reed pens glide steadily across the page. Each completed copy strengthens the survival of knowledge. Every duplicate becomes another chance against loss. Outside, the Mediterranean sparkles beneath the afternoon sun. Merchant ships continue arriving. With them come travelers carrying stories, languages, scientific observations, maps, and manuscripts gathered from distant lands. Alexandria does not merely collect scrolls, it collects civilizations. You pause before a display containing works by celebrated poets, philosophers, mathematicians, and historians. Some names remain famous even thousands of years later. Others have vanished entirely. That realization feels surprisingly moving. How many brilliant writers have disappeared simply because no copy survived? Entire lifetimes balanced upon fragile papyrus. A young apprentice hurries carefully between shelves, carrying a bundle of freshly copied scrolls. He nearly bumps into another scribe. Both freeze. The scrolls remain safely in his arms. They exchange relieved smiles. Some victories deserve quiet celebration. Nearby, an elderly scholar gazes thoughtfully toward the harbor. Perhaps he wonders which ship might bring tomorrow's discoveries. Or perhaps he is simply enjoying the sea breeze after spending several hours arguing about punctuation. Academic debates, after all, have always possessed remarkable endurance. As the evening light softens, golden sunlight pours across the reading hall. The shelves seem almost endless. You wish there were enough lifetimes to explore every single scroll. History, however, rarely grants such wishes. The Library of Alexandria would not vanish in one single dramatic afternoon, despite many popular stories suggesting otherwise. Instead, its decline likely unfolded gradually through several centuries, affected by political upheaval, changing rulers, warfare, economic pressures, and repeated episodes of damage. No single flame tells the whole story. The truth is quieter, and perhaps even sadder. As evening approaches, the librarians carefully return scrolls to their proper places. The last readers roll up their manuscripts. Oil lamps begin to replace the fading sunlight. You take one final look across the magnificent hall. It feels eternal. Yet you now know that even the greatest libraries depend upon people willing to protect them. Tomorrow, your journey climbs a steep hill to another remarkable collection, a proud rival overlooking the ancient city of Pergamum, where parchment would help write a new chapter in the story of preserving knowledge.
The sea breeze of Alexandria lingers for a little while as you continue your journey northward. Behind you, the endless shelves of papyrus scrolls slowly fade into memory. Ahead, the coastline gives way to rolling green hills, crowned by white stone buildings that shine warmly beneath the morning sun. A steep road climbs toward an impressive acropolis overlooking fertile valleys below. The climb is steady, not impossible, but after several hundred stone steps, you begin quietly appreciating every ancient scholar who chose to stay inside the library rather than repeatedly walking up this hill. Knowledge was clearly good exercise. At the summit, stands the magnificent city of Pergamum. Its temples, theaters, and royal buildings rise proudly above the surrounding countryside. Yet one building quietly captures your attention more than any other: its library. One of the best established historical facts is that the Library of Pergamum became one of the greatest scholarly collections of the Hellenistic world, rivaling Alexandria in both prestige and ambition. Built under the Attalid kings, it reportedly housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls and attracted philosophers, physicians, poets, and historians from across the Mediterranean. Pergamum was determined not merely to own books, it wanted to become a home for ideas. You step through broad marble doors into a spacious reading hall. Tall columns support a beautifully painted ceiling high above. Large windows admit generous amounts of natural light, illuminating rows of carefully arranged shelves. Unlike the clay tablets of Nineveh or the endless papyrus rolls of Alexandria, many of the manuscripts here are written on something different: parchment. Smooth, flexible, strong. You gently touch one sheet resting upon a reading table. Its surface feels remarkably durable beneath your fingertips. The librarian notices your curiosity and smiles. He carefully lifts the manuscript so the light catches its fine texture. One famous historical tradition tells us that when access to Egyptian papyrus became more difficult, Pergamum expanded the use of parchment made from specially prepared animal skins. Although historians still debate how much politics truly influenced the shift, Pergamum certainly became closely associated with the material that eventually took its name from the city. Sometimes, necessity quietly inspires remarkable innovation. Historians still argue whether Egypt deliberately restricted papyrus exports to slow Pergamum's growing library, or whether later writers exaggerated the rivalry between the two great centers of learning. Like many ancient stories, reality was probably more complicated. Competition, however, certainly existed. The librarian leads you toward a quiet gallery where scholars work in thoughtful silence. Some compare different copies of Greek tragedies. Others study medicine. One elderly mathematician patiently sketches geometric figures onto a wax tablet before transferring the final version onto parchment. The room carries only the gentle scratching of pens. Occasionally, someone clears a throat. A scroll softly rolls open. The silence feels wonderfully alive. Knowledge does not always need conversation. Sometimes it simply asks for concentration. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that Pergamum's library may have been arranged with enough space between shelves and exterior walls to improve airflow and reduce moisture, helping preserve valuable manuscripts. Ancient librarians already understood one important truth: books appreciate good ventilation almost as much as readers do. You certainly do. The hillside breeze drifting through the windows feels delightful after the climb. Outside the library, shaded courtyards provide peaceful places for discussion. Olive trees sway gently above stone benches where philosophers debate questions that still fascinate people today. What creates happiness? Can knowledge make someone truly wise? How should a good society govern itself? Judging by the expressions around the benches, these conversations have been continuing for quite some time. Nobody appears eager to finish them. Perhaps the questions matter more than the answers. You wander into a room devoted entirely to maps. Rolled charts fill neatly labeled shelves. Some describe coastlines, others record trade routes stretching across distant kingdoms. A young apprentice carefully updates one map after listening to sailors who recently returned from a voyage. The coastline changes by only a tiny amount, yet accuracy matters. Exploration improves one careful correction at a time. Nearby, another scholar copies botanical illustrations. Leaves, flowers, medicinal herbs. Each plant receives careful attention.
Beauty and usefulness share the same page. You smile, remembering the peaceful herb gardens from earlier journeys through ancient history. Knowledge, like rosemary, seems to grow surprisingly well when people care for it patiently. The afternoon sun casts warm light across polished marble floors. Dust dances lazily in the bright beams streaming through the high windows. Several students quietly gather around a respected teacher. He unrolls a manuscript. They lean forward together. No one interrupts, no one checks a glowing screen. The only notification arriving today is wisdom. Delivery may take slightly longer. The results often last considerably longer too. As evening approaches, the chief librarian carefully inspects the collection. He checks bindings, examines parchment for signs of dampness, ensures every manuscript rests safely upon its proper shelf. His work resembles that of the gardeners you once watched tending ancient orchards. Small acts repeated faithfully every day preserve something beautiful for generations yet to come. The sun begins lowering toward the western hills. Golden light floods the reading hall. The parchment almost seemed to glow softly. You realize every great library shares the same quiet heartbeat. Not walls, not shelves, people, readers, scribes, teachers, librarians. Without them, even the finest building becomes only empty stone. You take one final look across Pergamum's peaceful halls before stepping back outside. The evening breeze welcomes you once more. Far beyond these hills lies another remarkable destination, a monastery where thousands upon thousands of handwritten manuscripts fill towering libraries, carrying knowledge across continents and centuries. Tomorrow, your journey turns east toward one of history's greatest centers of learning, Nalanda, where wisdom will be copied patiently beneath the sound of temple bells.
The cool breeze from the hilltop library of Pergamum stays with you for a while as the road slowly turns east. The landscape changes almost day by day. Rocky hills give way to broad plains. The air grows warmer. Caravans appear more frequently, their camels carrying silk, spices, medicines, manuscripts, and stories gathered from lands so distant that even the traders cannot agree on how long the journey truly took. One merchant confidently claims 6 months, another insists 8, a third shrugs cheerfully and says, "Long enough." That answer somehow feels the most accurate. The road continues through forests, villages, rivers, and mountain passes until, one peaceful morning, temple bells drift softly through the mist. Ahead rises a vast complex of red brick monasteries surrounded by gardens, ponds, and shaded walkways. Monks in simple robes move quietly between buildings. Students arrive carrying bundles of manuscripts. Birdsong mingles gently with distant chanting. You have reached Nalanda Mahavihara. At first glance, it resembles a peaceful monastery. Spend a few moments here, however, and you quickly realize it is something much larger. It is a city devoted to learning. One of the best established historical facts is that Nalanda flourished for many centuries as one of the world's greatest centers of education. Scholars from across Asia traveled here to study subjects including philosophy, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, grammar, literature, and Buddhist teachings. Its libraries became famous throughout the region. Knowledge here is not stored quietly, it lives. You pass beneath a beautifully carved gateway into a broad courtyard shaded by banyan trees. Students sit beneath their spreading branches discussing philosophy, while teachers answer questions with remarkable patience. Nobody appears rushed. Even the conversations seem to breathe slowly. Beyond the courtyard stands the library complex itself. Several large buildings rise above the surrounding monasteries. Some later accounts describe these libraries as towering multi-storied structures containing countless handwritten manuscripts. Whether every later description is perfectly accurate remains uncertain. Yet there is little doubt that Nalanda housed one of the richest manuscript collections of its age. The librarian welcomes you with a respectful bow. Unlike the clay tablets of Nineveh or the papyrus scrolls of Alexandria, the manuscripts here are beautifully prepared bundles of palm leaf pages. Each narrow leaf has been carefully inscribed, dried, polished, and threaded together between protective wooden covers. You gently lift one. It is surprisingly light. The pages make the faintest whisper as they turn. Historians still argue whether the famous descriptions of Nalanda's enormous libraries, written centuries later, somewhat enlarged their size through admiration, or whether the collections truly matched those extraordinary accounts. Whatever the exact numbers, their reputation spread across Asia for good reason. Inside one quiet copying room, rows of monks sit cross-legged at low desks. Sunlight filters softly through open windows. Each monk works with calm concentration. A master slowly reads from an older manuscript, while younger scribes copy every character with astonishing precision. No one hurries. Every letter matters. A single mistake could change the meaning of an important teaching. The silence is broken only by birds outside and the gentle scratching of writing tools. You remember the scribes of Mesopotamia pressing wedges into clay, the copyists of Alexandria rolling papyrus, the scholars of Pergamum writing upon parchment. Different materials, the same devotion. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that students traveling to Nalanda sometimes journeyed thousands of kilometers, crossing mountains, deserts, and dangerous roads simply for the opportunity to study there. Imagine explaining that your commute to school involves crossing half a continent. Suddenly, missing the morning lesson seems considerably less tempting. You continue through another hall, where carefully labeled manuscript bundles rest inside wooden cabinets. Some contain medical knowledge, others preserve poetry, astronomy, logic, religious philosophy, languages, commentaries written by generations of teachers. The collection feels wonderfully alive because scholars constantly borrow, study, copy, debate, and return the manuscripts. Books here are not sleeping. They are busy. Outside, lotus flowers bloom peacefully upon a broad pond. Dragonflies skim across the water. Several students walk slowly along shaded pathways while quietly discussing mathematics. You smile. Somehow, mathematics sounds gentler beneath birdsong. Nearby, an elderly teacher pauses beneath a banyan tree before drawing geometric figures into the dust with a simple stick. His students lean forward attentively. No expensive equipment, no elaborate classroom, only curiosity. Learning has always traveled remarkably light. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of jasmine through open windows into the library. A young apprentice carefully fans several freshly written palm leaves so the ink dries evenly. Another gently polishes wooden manuscript covers before placing completed works onto shelves. Even preservation becomes an act of quiet respect. As evening approaches, monks gather for peaceful chanting. The sound echoes softly through the monastery courtyards before gradually fading into the warm twilight. The library doors remain open a little longer. A few dedicated scholars continue reading beneath the glow of oil lamps. Knowledge, it seems, rarely watches the clock. Yet, as you quietly leave the peaceful halls, history whispers a difficult truth. Centuries later, Nalanda would suffer catastrophic destruction during invasion. Its priceless manuscripts, copied patiently across generations, would be lost in unimaginable numbers. The silence that followed echoed far beyond these walls. You pause for one last look at the glowing library windows. Tonight, they remain full of light. Tomorrow, your journey will search for other remarkable collections that escaped oblivion in the most unlikely places, hidden beneath desert sands, sealed inside forgotten caves, and protected by nothing more than dry air and extraordinary luck.
The temple bells of Nalanda grow fainter with every step you take. Soon, they disappear completely. The peaceful monastery settles gently into memory, leaving behind the image of patient monks, carefully tied palm leaf manuscripts, and quiet courtyards filled with learning. Ahead, the world becomes far less green. The air grows dry. The wind carries tiny grains of sand that sparkle beneath the morning sun. Your footsteps leave shallow prints across a vast desert landscape where rocky hills rise unexpectedly from endless golden plains. At first glance, it feels empty. Then you remember something history loves to teach. Empty places often hide extraordinary secrets. One of the best established historical facts is that many ancient manuscripts survived not because they were actively protected, but because they were accidentally preserved in exceptionally dry caves, desert settlements, sealed jars, abandoned temples, and forgotten storerooms where moisture could not destroy them. Sometimes the greatest librarian is the climate itself. You approach the mouth of a narrow cave. Its entrance is modest. No towering columns, no royal gates, no carved marble staircase, just rough stone shaped by wind and time. Inside, however, the air feels wonderfully cool. The silence is so complete that even your breathing seems unusually loud. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, shelves carved into the rock slowly become visible. Bundles of scrolls rest neatly inside shallow niches. Wooden boxes sit undisturbed beneath layers of dust. Nothing has moved here for centuries, and that is exactly why everything survived. You carefully kneel beside one storage niche. A scroll wrapped in faded cloth rests exactly where someone placed it long ago. You imagine the unknown person gently setting it down before leaving, perhaps intending to return a few days later. Instead, centuries quietly passed. History has a curious habit of stretching, "I'll be back soon." Historians still argue whether certain hidden manuscript collections were intentionally concealed during times of danger, or whether they were simply forgotten as communities gradually disappeared or relocated. Sometimes the evidence refuses to reveal the full story. The mystery remains part of the discovery. Farther inside the cave, a small group of scribes appears in your imagination. You can almost picture them carefully organizing texts before sealing the entrance. Perhaps they hoped future generations would find them. Perhaps they expected to return. Either way, their quiet work echoes across thousands of years. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that in some ancient desert regions, discarded documents were occasionally reused to reinforce mummy cartonnage, meaning fragments of otherwise lost writings survived because they became part of funerary materials. History has an extraordinary recycling program. Imagine discovering an important ancient text because someone disliked wasting old paper. Environmental responsibility with unexpected archaeological benefits. You leave the cave and continue deeper into the desert. The afternoon sun shines brilliantly overhead, yet the dry air remains your greatest ally. Moisture, which destroys so many manuscripts elsewhere, rarely lingers here. Papyrus survives, leather survives, ink survives. Even delicate fibers endure far longer than anyone could have imagined. Nature, which often destroys libraries, occasionally chooses to protect them instead. Ahead, another discovery awaits.
This time, not inside a cave, but beneath the crumbling walls of an abandoned temple. Archaeologists gently brush away layers of sand. A wooden chest slowly emerges. Its hinges have long since rusted away. Its contents remain astonishingly intact. Inside lie carefully folded manuscripts wrapped in linen. Every layer removed reveals another forgotten voice. Nobody speaks loudly. Moments like this deserve whispers. You watch as each manuscript is lifted with remarkable care. Soft brushes remove centuries of dust. Tiny fragments are supported before they can bend. Patience becomes the most valuable tool at the excavation. Not strength, not speed, only patience. You remember the careful librarians of Alexandria, the patient copyists of Pergamum, the devoted monks of Nalanda. Now archaeologists continue the same quiet tradition. Different centuries, the same respect. Nearby, a young researcher smiles after identifying a familiar script on one weathered fragment. Months of careful excavation have finally answered a long-standing question. Tiny discoveries often bring enormous joy. Academic celebrations, you notice, involve considerably more smiling than fireworks. The afternoon breeze stirs loose sand across the ruins. Palm trees sway gently beside a distant oasis. Birds circle overhead before settling near the water. Life quietly continues around the forgotten library. It always has. You pause beside a weathered clay jar, partially buried beneath the earth. Inside rests another tightly rolled manuscript. The jar protected it from insects, from moisture, from sunlight. Sometimes the simplest storage solutions become the most effective. Modern waterproof containers suddenly seem part of a very old tradition. As evening approaches, the desert transforms. The harsh midday brightness softens into warm shades of amber and gold. Long shadows stretch across the dunes. The temperature begins to fall. The silence becomes even gentler. You take one last look toward the cave entrance, now glowing softly beneath the setting sun. It waited patiently for thousands of years, never asking for attention, never demanding recognition, only quietly safeguarding knowledge until someone cared enough to look. Tomorrow, your journey leaves the quiet protection of caves and deserts behind. You will enter the magnificent imperial libraries of ancient China, where emperors gathered immense collections of bamboo slips, silk manuscripts, and books, only to face the constant challenge of preserving knowledge through changing dynasties, political upheaval, and the relentless passage of time.
The desert slowly fades behind you. Its cool caves, silent jars, and forgotten manuscripts remain safely tucked into memory as the road bends eastward once again. The landscape changes almost imperceptibly at first. The dry sand gives way to rolling grasslands. Then broad rivers appear, winding through fertile valleys lined with willow trees. Mist rises gently from the water in the cool morning air. Ahead, beyond high walls of gray stone and crimson gates, lies one of the greatest imperial capitals of the ancient world. The city awakens with quiet purpose. Officials in flowing robes cross spacious courtyards. Messengers hurry along carefully swept streets. Temple bells ring softly in the distance. The scent of cedar wood mingles with incense drifting through palace gardens. Everything feels orderly, measured, intentional. You have entered ancient China. Within these palace walls, generations of emperors sought not only to rule vast territories, but also to preserve the written knowledge of their civilization. One of the best established historical facts is that successive Chinese dynasties established enormous imperial libraries and archives to preserve classics, government records, historical chronicles, philosophy, poetry, astronomy, medicine, and official documents.
These collections became essential to administration as well as scholarship. Here, books help govern an empire. You pass through another carved gate into a large archive building. Instead of shelves filled with scrolls alone, you notice an extraordinary variety of writing materials. Bundles of bamboo slips tied neatly together, silk manuscripts rolled carefully around wooden rods, paper books in later centuries stacked with remarkable precision. Each material tells part of the long story of Chinese writing. A senior archivist greets you with a respectful bow. His sleeves are spotless, his movements calm and deliberate. He carries a narrow register listing the location of thousands of texts. Without it, finding a single manuscript would take days. Even in the ancient world, organization quietly saves everyone's afternoon. The archivist leads you toward a cabinet containing bamboo slips. Each narrow strip bears neat columns of carefully brushed characters. Small cords bind dozens of slips together into a complete work. You gently lift one. It is heavier than expected, a reminder that books once possessed very literal weight. Reading several volumes in a single day could become excellent arm exercise. Perhaps ancient scholars never skipped library day. Historians still argue whether some of the earliest imperial collections accurately reflected the full diversity of Chinese thought, or whether political priorities sometimes determined which texts deserved copying and preservation. Libraries preserve knowledge. They also reflect the values of those who build them. Nearby, several scribes sit before low desks. Unlike the reed pens you saw in Egypt or Mesopotamia, they work with elegant brushes dipped into rich black ink. Each character flows gracefully across the page. Writing resembles painting. Every stroke matters. One apprentice pauses before beginning a difficult line. He inhales quietly, then places each brushstroke with remarkable confidence. Watching him feels oddly relaxing. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that during different dynasties, court officials occasionally searched throughout the empire for rare books to copy into the imperial collections, rewarding families who preserved ancient manuscripts. Imagine someone knocking politely on your door and asking, "Excuse us, do you happen to own a 200-year-old philosophical masterpiece?" That would certainly make for an unusual neighborhood conversation. You continue through the archive. Large wooden cabinets line every wall. Small labels identify histories, poetry, agricultural manuals, military treatises, medical works, calendars, and collections of songs. Every subject has its proper place. Nothing appears hurried. Even dust seems respectfully organized. Outside, the palace gardens bloom quietly beneath flowering trees. Ponds reflect elegant bridges. Koi glide slowly through clear water. Several scholars walk together beneath shaded paths, discussing passages from the classics. Their voices remain soft enough that birds continue singing uninterrupted. Knowledge and nature seem perfectly comfortable sharing the same space. You pause before a beautifully illustrated astronomical manuscript. Tiny painted stars cover the page. Constellations stretch across carefully measured diagrams. Ancient observers spent generations watching the night sky with astonishing patience. Empires rose and fell beneath those same stars. The heavens remained faithful to their rhythms. A young librarian carefully wraps a precious manuscript inside layers of protective cloth before returning it to its cabinet. His movements remind you of the monks at Nalanda, tying palm leaf texts together. Different civilization, same careful hands. The afternoon passes peacefully. Officials quietly consult legal records. Historians compare earlier chronicles. Doctors study medical texts describing herbs and treatments. Students copy poems onto fresh paper. The library never truly becomes noisy. Its busiest moments still feel calm. Then your guide pauses beside a locked cabinet. He unlocks it slowly. Inside rest several especially valuable manuscripts. Some exist nowhere else. For a moment, you understand the enormous responsibility carried by generations of librarians. Protecting these works means protecting memory itself. Yet memory can be fragile. Throughout Chinese history, wars, fires, dynastic changes, and political upheavals repeatedly threatened even the greatest collections. Some libraries vanished completely. Others survived only because dedicated scholars secretly copied important texts before disaster arrived. A single duplicate sometimes meant the difference between extinction and survival. That thought lingers with you as evening settles over the palace. Lanterns glow softly beneath the eaves. The archivists complete their final inventories before carefully closing each cabinet. Outside, the moon begins rising over the rooftops. Its pale light reflects gently upon the palace ponds. Tomorrow, your journey follows knowledge westward once more, arriving in the bustling heart of medieval Baghdad, where the legendary House of Wisdom gathered scholars from many cultures into one extraordinary library devoted to translating and preserving the ideas of the world.
The palace lanterns of ancient China slowly disappear behind you. For a while, their warm glow remains visible across the evening mist, reflected in quiet ponds and polished rooftops. Then the road bends once again. Caravans begin appearing from every direction. Some carry silk, others transport spices, perfumes, precious stones, paper, and carefully wrapped indles of books. You are following one of history's great crossroads. Knowledge itself seems to travel this road. After weeks of gentle travel, the horizon begins to shimmer beneath the golden light of morning. Palm trees appear beside a broad river. Beyond them rises an immense city crowned with graceful domes and elegant minarets. The bustling streets hum with merchants, scholars, craftsmen, physicians, translators, and travelers speaking languages from across Africa, Asia, and Europe. You have arrived in Baghdad during its golden age. At the center of this remarkable city stands one of the most celebrated intellectual institutions in history, the House of Wisdom. One of the best established historical facts is that the House of Wisdom flourished during the Abbasid Caliphate, particularly under rulers such as Harun al-Rashid and al-Mamun. It became a renowned center for scholarship, where texts from Greek, Persian, Indian, and other traditions were translated, studied, copied, and expanded upon. This was more than a library. It was a meeting place for civilizations. You step through a beautifully carved wooden doorway into a spacious courtyard. A fountain murmurs quietly at its center. Orange trees perfume the morning air. Around the courtyard stand long halls filled with shelves, writing desks, and reading rooms. Scholars move calmly from one chamber to another, carrying stacks of manuscripts. Nobody appears hurried. Even discovery seems wonderfully patient here. Inside one room, translators sit side by side. One reads a Greek manuscript aloud. Another discusses difficult phrases in Syriac. A third carefully writes the final Arabic translation. Ideas cross languages, one thoughtful sentence at a time. You smile. Books apparently enjoy learning new languages almost as much as people do. Historians still argue whether the House of Wisdom functioned primarily as a formal library, an academy, a translation bureau, or some remarkable combination of all three. Perhaps its greatest strength was refusing to fit neatly into a single category. Learning rarely enjoys small boxes. You wander toward a long gallery lined with mathematical works. Astronomers compare star charts beside large brass instruments.
Nearby, physicians quietly debate medical observations while consulting earlier writings from Greece, Persia, and India. Rather than simply preserving older knowledge, these scholars constantly test, improve, and expand it. Libraries do not merely protect ideas. Sometimes they help create new ones. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that some translators working in Baghdad became so highly valued that stories later claimed they were rewarded according to the weight of the books they translated, receiving gold equal to the manuscript's weight. Whether every version of that story is literally true remains uncertain, but if it were, large encyclopedias suddenly become extremely motivating. The scent of fresh ink fills another copying room. Paper has become far more common now than during your earlier visits to Alexandria or Pergamum. Sheets dry neatly on wooden racks, while skilled calligraphers fill new pages with graceful writing. Their brushes move with remarkable confidence. Watching them feels almost musical. Outside, pigeons flutter across tiled rooftops before settling beside the courtyard fountain. Students gather beneath shaded arcades, discussing philosophy and geometry. Some compare maps brought by travelers from distant lands. Others argue politely about the movement of planets. Fortunately, academic disagreements generally involve considerably fewer swords than medieval politics. The chief librarian welcomes you into a climate-controlled storage room where especially valuable manuscripts rest inside protective cabinets. He explains, through careful gestures, that humidity, insects, careless handling, and fire remain constant concerns. The enemies of knowledge are often surprisingly ordinary. You remember the clay tablets of Nineveh surviving flames, the dry caves protecting forgotten scrolls, the monks at Nalanda patiently copying palm leaves. Different libraries, different dangers, the same determination. You pause before a beautifully illuminated astronomical manuscript. Gold and blue pigments shimmer softly beneath the afternoon light. The stars seem almost alive on the page. A young apprentice carefully blows away loose dust before closing the volume. Gentleness has become second nature here. As the day slowly fades, scholars continue arriving. One carries newly copied philosophical works. Another brings observations from distant observatories. A traveler delivers maps gathered after months crossing deserts and mountains. Knowledge keeps flowing into Baghdad like the nearby rivers. No civilization creates wisdom entirely alone. The House of Wisdom quietly proves that ideas grow strongest when they travel. Yet as evening settles over the city, history whispers another difficult truth. Centuries later, invasion would bring terrible destruction to Baghdad. Many priceless manuscripts would disappear forever. Others would survive only because earlier copies had already spread across distant lands. The librarians could not save everything, but they saved far more than they could ever have known. You leave the peaceful courtyard beneath a sky filled with stars. Their familiar patterns remind you that every civilization has looked upward with the same quiet curiosity. Tomorrow, your journey turns toward another group of patient guardians of knowledge. Monks working in remote monasteries where cold stone walls, candlelight, and endless hours of careful copying helped countless ancient books survive into the modern world.
The stars above Baghdad slowly fade as dawn paints the horizon with soft shades of gold and pale blue. The bustling markets, fragrant gardens, and busy translation halls settle gently into memory. Your path now grows quieter. The wide caravan roads become narrow forest trails. Towering oak and pine trees rise on either side, their branches forming a cool green canopy overhead. The air smells of damp earth, moss, and wood smoke. Bird song replaces the lively conversations of merchants. After days of peaceful travel, a stone monastery appears on a hill overlooking a winding river. Its walls are thick. Its windows are narrow. Its gardens are simple but lovingly cared for. Nothing here seems grand. Everything feels purposeful. You push open a heavy wooden door. It creaks softly, revealing a peaceful cloister where monks walk silently beneath covered stone walkways. A small fountain trickles in the center of the courtyard. The sound echoes gently against ancient walls. Some monks tend vegetables. Others gather herbs. A few quietly carry bundles of manuscripts toward a long building at the far end. That building is the scriptorium. One of the best established historical facts is that medieval monasteries across Europe became vital centers for preserving ancient literature. Monks carefully copied religious texts as well as many surviving works of Greek and Roman history, philosophy, science, and poetry, ensuring countless writings reached later generations. Without these patient copyists, many ancient voices might have disappeared forever. You enter the scriptorium. Immediately, warm candlelight fills the room. Large windows admit as much daylight as possible. Long wooden desks stand in neat rows. Each monk works quietly, completely absorbed in the page before him. No conversations interrupt the rhythm, only the soft scratching of quill pens. Occasionally, someone turns a page. A log settles gently inside the fireplace. The silence feels comforting, not lonely, purposeful. A senior monk smiles kindly before inviting you to observe his work. He carefully copies one line at a time from an older manuscript resting upon a wooden stand. Every letter receives equal attention. Every space is measured. Even the smallest flourish matters. Mistakes require patient correction. Ink, unlike memory, rarely forgives carelessness. Historians still argue whether medieval monasteries preserved ancient texts primarily through deliberate scholarly effort, or whether simple routine and devotion accidentally saved works whose long-term importance could never have been predicted. Perhaps both explanations hold some truth. Sometimes history survives because someone quietly performs today's ordinary task exceptionally well. The monk gently turns another page. Its edges glow softly beneath the morning sunlight. Beautiful red and blue decorations surround the opening letter. Gold leaf catches the light whenever the page moves. You pause to admire the artwork. These are not simply books. They are works of art. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that some medieval manuscripts occasionally included tiny notes written by tired scribes in the margins, quietly complaining about cold weather, cramped hands, or long hours of copying. One famous sentiment can be summarized rather simply: "My hand hurts." Across 1,000 years, students everywhere understand completely. You continue through another room where freshly prepared parchment hangs drying upon wooden frames. Nearby, another monk carefully grinds colorful minerals into pigments: blue from precious stone, red from natural earth, green from copper compounds. Each color requires patience. Beauty rarely arrives in a hurry. Outside, bees drift lazily among lavender growing beside the monastery walls. The herb garden reminds you of the peaceful gardens you visited long ago. Rosemary, sage, mint, thyme. Knowledge and gardening continue sharing remarkably similar lessons. Care today, benefits tomorrow. A young novice quietly carries completed manuscripts toward the library. You follow him. The monastery library is smaller than Alexandria or Baghdad, far smaller. Yet every shelf carries extraordinary importance. Each manuscript here has survived because someone chose to preserve it.
The librarian unlocks a sturdy wooden cabinet. Inside rest treasured volumes wrapped carefully in protective cloth. He handles each one with remarkable gentleness. The pages whisper softly as they open. Some contain ancient philosophy. Others preserve Roman history, medical observations, poetry, biblical commentaries, classical grammar. Every shelf becomes another bridge across time. You remember the clay tablets of Nineveh, the scrolls of Alexandria, the parchment of Pergamum, the palm leaves of Nalanda, the paper manuscripts of Baghdad. Different materials, one shared hope, that tomorrow would still remember today. Outside, afternoon sunlight warms the monastery gardens. Several monks pause briefly under an apple tree before returning to their work. One smiles while watching a curious cat wander confidently through the cloister. The cat appears convinced it supervises the entire monastery. Judging by everyone's willingness to step around it, perhaps it does. As evening approaches, candles replace daylight inside the scriptorium. Golden light flickers across carefully written pages. The steady scratching of quills continues, line after line, page after page, year after year. Knowledge survives not only through great libraries, but also through countless quiet evenings exactly like this one. You leave the monastery after sunset. The bell rings softly across the valley. Its echo slowly disappears into the forest. Ahead, your journey grows more difficult. The next libraries you visit will not fall peacefully into silence through age alone. They will stand in the path of war, conquest, accidental fire, and human conflict, reminding you how fragile even the greatest collections can become when history changes course.
The monastery bell fades behind you as the forest path opens onto a wide plain. For a while, the world feels wonderfully peaceful. Morning mist rises from distant fields. Birds drift lazily across the sky. A farmer guides oxen through dark soil that glistens with dew. Nothing suggests disaster, and that, perhaps, is the unsettling thing about many lost libraries. The day before they vanish often looks perfectly ordinary. You continue walking toward a walled city where merchants are setting up their stalls. The scent of fresh bread drifts through the streets. Children chase each other past fountains. Scholars carry bundles of manuscripts beneath their arms. Life unfolds exactly as it did yesterday. No one knows that history is about to turn sharply. One of the clearest historical facts is that many important libraries were destroyed or dispersed during periods of war, conquest, political upheaval, or civil conflict. Buildings burned, collections were looted, archives were abandoned, and carefully preserved knowledge vanished in surprisingly short periods of time. Centuries of copying could disappear in a single season. You pass through the library's doors just as a librarian carefully returns a manuscript to its shelf. He pauses to straighten a label. A scribe trims the tip of a quill. Another scholar quietly compares two different versions of a poem. The scene feels familiar now, comforting. You have seen this rhythm before in Alexandria, Pergamum, Nalanda, Baghdad, and the monastery scriptorium. Knowledge always seems to create the same atmosphere. Then, a distant sound interrupts the silence. A horn. Another answers from beyond the city walls. Conversations stop. People glance toward the windows. The librarian's hand remains resting on the shelf for a moment longer than before. Nobody speaks loudly. They do not need to. Historians still argue whether some famous library destructions resulted primarily from deliberate targeting of knowledge, or whether the collections were simply caught in the wider chaos of military campaigns and urban warfare. The The distinction matters. So does the result. Outside, hurried footsteps echo through the streets. Messengers run past carrying urgent orders. Shopkeepers begin pulling goods indoors. The scholar beside you carefully rolls up his manuscript instead of leaving it open on the table. Instinctively, everyone starts protecting what matters most. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that during various historical conflicts, librarians and scholars sometimes hid manuscripts inside walls, buried them in sealed containers, or carried them away disguised among ordinary belongings in desperate attempts to save at least part of a collection. Imagine trying to smuggle a philosophical masterpiece out of a city by pretending it is laundry. History occasionally demands remarkable creativity. The librarian opens a storage room and begins handing manuscripts to trusted assistants. Take these. No speeches, no dramatic declarations, only practical urgency. You help carry bundles through narrow corridors toward a safer chamber beneath the building. The air smells of dust, wax, and old parchment. Quickly, shelves fill with hastily stacked volumes. Some can be saved, not all. That realization settles heavily in the room. Above, distant shouting grows louder. The city trembles with movement. Yet underground, the librarians continue working methodically. A catalog is updated. Bundles are labeled. The most irreplaceable texts are moved first. Even in crisis, organization matters, especially in crisis. You remember the dry caves preserving forgotten scrolls, the monks copying manuscripts by candlelight, the translators of Baghdad working line by line. Every generation fought the same battle in different ways, against fire, against moisture, against neglect, against time. Now, against war. Hours pass. Smoke eventually drifts through a crack near the ceiling. The librarian closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them again, he simply says, "Continue." The assistants keep moving books. No one wastes precious moments on despair. One young apprentice clutches a bundle so tightly that the cords creak. He cannot be more than 16, yet he carries enough knowledge to fill several lifetimes. Outside, bells ring frantically. Inside, pages rustle softly. The contrast feels surreal. Civilization shouting above, memory whispering below. You help stack another armful of manuscripts. Some contain histories, others medicine, poetry, astronomy, legal codes, stories. The entire human experience compressed into fragile pages. A single spark could erase them. As evening approaches, the noise outside gradually changes. Less shouting, more crackling. The librarian understands immediately. Fires have begun. He walks slowly between the shelves one final time, touching several volumes gently as he passes, not because it will save them, because goodbye deserves dignity. Eventually, he turns toward the hidden chamber. We have saved what we can. No bitterness, no anger, only exhaustion. You sit quietly among the rescued manuscripts while smoke drifts faintly through the stone passageways. Somewhere above, a library is dying. Yet around you, dozens of texts have survived because a handful of people refused to abandon them. History often remembers the destruction. It should also remember the rescuers. When darkness finally settles over the city, the hidden chamber remains lit by a single oil lamp. Its small flame reflects softly on stacked manuscripts, waiting for safer days. You realize that every surviving ancient book may represent countless untold acts of courage, patience, and determination. Tomorrow, your journey follows those acts forward through time, joining the explorers, collectors and archaeologists who searched ruins, monasteries, deserts, and forgotten storerooms for the scattered fragments of libraries the world believed lost forever. The little oil lamp burns steadily behind you as you quietly leave the hidden chamber. The rescued manuscripts remain safe for now, stacked carefully beneath cool stone vaults where silence once again replaces the distant sounds of conflict. Morning arrives gently. The smoke has disappeared. Birdsong has returned. The world continues, as it always seems to do. Yet something has changed inside you. You no longer see ruins as empty places. You wonder what they might still be hiding. That thought follows you across centuries. Your path now winds through forgotten temples, collapsed palaces, abandoned monasteries, buried cities, and wind-swept deserts. Instead of librarians, you now travel beside archaeologists, explorers, historians, and careful conservators. Their tools are different. Their mission feels wonderfully familiar. Recover what time almost erased. One of the best established historical facts is that many important ancient manuscripts and library fragments have been rediscovered through archaeological excavations, accidental discoveries, monastery collections, desert caves, abandoned settlements, and private archives. Every generation continues adding small pieces to humanity's larger historical puzzle. Some libraries vanish. Their echoes do not. You arrive at an excavation where dozens of researchers work patiently beneath the warm morning sun. Nobody digs hurriedly. Every movement appears deliberate. Soft brushes replace large shovels. Tiny measuring tools sit beside notebooks filled with sketches. History rewards patience far more often than speed. An archaeologist kneels beside a layer of compact earth. Very gently, she brushes away another thin coating of dust. A corner of something dark slowly appears. Not stone, not pottery, wood. The entire team grows noticeably quieter. Carefully, very carefully, a small wooden writing tablet emerges after spending centuries hidden beneath collapsed walls. Nobody cheers. Instead, everyone smiles with remarkable restraint. Excitement in archaeology tends to arrive wearing comfortable shoes. Historians still argue whether countless important manuscript collections still remain buried beneath unexplored sites, or whether most surviving discoveries have already been found. The truth remains wonderfully uncertain. The Earth still keeps many secrets. Nearby, another group examines tiny fragments no larger than your thumbnail. Individually, they seem insignificant. Together, they may belong to a manuscript copied over 1,000 years ago. Each fragment receives a number, a photograph, a careful description. Nothing is too small. Sometimes, an entire forgotten story begins with a single surviving sentence. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that in some archaeological excavations, researchers have identified libraries because collapsed shelves left orderly rows of fallen manuscripts exactly where they had rested before buildings gave way. Even collapse can preserve a pattern. History occasionally leaves surprisingly neat clues. You continue toward a conservation tent where newly discovered fragments rest beneath soft lighting. Humidity is carefully controlled. Temperature remains steady. Conservators wear light gloves while supporting fragile pages with delicate tools. Their work resembles surgery, gentle, precise, patient. One conservator spends nearly an hour separating two pages that became pressed together centuries earlier. She succeeds. Another tiny voice from the past begins speaking again. You smile quietly. The room seems full of whispers. Outside, the excavation continues. Students learn how to recognize traces of ancient ink. Others map foundations where library walls once stood. A senior researcher explains how pollen, charcoal, broken shelves, and writing tools together help reconstruct long-vanished collections. No single clue solves the mystery. Hundreds of tiny clues slowly become one clear picture. You remember the clay tablets of Mesopotamia, the scrolls of Alexandria, the parchment of Pergamum, the palm leaves of Nalanda, the manuscripts of Baghdad, the monastery libraries. Each seemed permanent while people cared for them. Now archaeologists patiently care for what remains. The responsibility simply passed to another generation. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of dry grass across the ruins. Swallows circle above broken walls. Wildflowers bloom beside ancient foundations where readers once quietly studied. Nature has reclaimed much, not everything. You pause beside a weathered stone inscription recently uncovered from the earth. Only half the writing survived. The rest disappeared long ago. Yet those remaining words still matter. Incomplete history remains history. Nearby, a graduate student excitedly compares two manuscript fragments discovered months apart. To everyone else, they resembled tiny scraps. To her, they fit together perfectly. A sentence interrupted for nearly 1,500 years suddenly becomes complete. Her smile says everything. Sometimes the greatest discoveries measure only a few centimeters. As evening approaches, the excavation gradually winds down. Tools are cleaned, finds are carefully packed, protective covers are placed over exposed structures before nightfall. The archaeologists leave nothing to chance. You take one final walk across the quiet site. The setting sun paints the ruins with warm amber light. Broken walls cast long, peaceful shadows. Somewhere beneath your feet, more forgotten pages may still be waiting. That thought feels comforting rather than mysterious. History is not finished telling its story. Tomorrow, you will open some of the remarkable manuscripts that survived against every expectation, discovering how even a handful of rescued pages can illuminate entire civilizations that seemed almost completely lost.
The excavation grows quiet behind you. Canvas covers now protect the exposed ruins from the cool night air, and the archaeologists have packed away their brushes, notebooks, and measuring tools until morning. Only the evening breeze remains. It drifts gently across broken walls that once echoed with the footsteps of readers, scribes, and librarians. You pause for one last look. Somewhere beneath those stones, more forgotten pages may still be waiting. That thought stays with you as your journey continues toward a modern conservation library, where surviving manuscripts from many ancient collections now rest safely behind carefully controlled glass. There is no grand palace here, no towering temple, just a peaceful building filled with soft light and remarkable patience. The doors open quietly. Cool, dry air greets you. The room smells faintly of old parchment, leather bindings, cedar shelves, and paper that has outlived kingdoms. One of the clearest historical facts is that many surviving ancient manuscripts have reached the modern world only because generations of scribes, collectors, monks, scholars, librarians, and conservators repeatedly copied, repaired, protected, and rediscovered them. No manuscript survives alone. Every page carries the fingerprints of countless caretakers. A conservator carefully lifts a manuscript from a protective box. It rests on a specially designed cushion that supports its fragile spine. No hurried movements, no sudden gestures. Even turning a page becomes an act of respect. You lean closer.
The ink has faded slightly over the centuries, yet every line still speaks. Letters written by someone who never imagined you would one day read them continue to cross time with quiet confidence. It is a remarkable feeling. Historians still argue whether the surviving manuscripts we possess today accurately represent the most influential works of the ancient world, or whether countless masterpieces vanished completely, leaving history shaped by what happened to survive rather than what was once most important. It is a humbling thought. History is sometimes guided by chance. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that medieval scribes occasionally scraped older writing from parchment so the valuable material could be reused, creating what scholars call a palimpsest. With modern imaging technology, researchers have often discovered the hidden original writing still faintly preserved beneath the newer text. Imagine discovering an entire forgotten book hiding underneath another book. Ancient pages apparently enjoyed keeping secrets. You continue into another gallery. Here rests a beautifully illuminated manuscript. Gold leaf still catches the light despite centuries passing since it was first applied. The colors remain astonishingly vivid. Deep blue, rich crimson, soft green. Tiny painted vines curl around elegant lettering. The artist clearly believed beauty belonged beside knowledge. You remember the monks patiently grinding pigments, the librarians carefully shelving finished works, the translators in Baghdad comparing languages, the copyists of Alexandria rolling fresh scrolls, the scribes of Mesopotamia pressing wedges into clay. Every journey has quietly led here. A single surviving page now carries echoes of them all. Nearby, another conservator examines a torn manuscript beneath gentle magnification. Instead of replacing damaged sections, she stabilizes them so future generations may continue studying the original. The goal is not perfection. The goal is survival. Sometimes preserving history means accepting its scars. A young student quietly copies notes while observing the conservation work. Questions fill his notebook. Every answer creates another question. Curiosity continues exactly as it did thousands of years ago, only the desks have changed. Outside the library windows, rain begins falling softly. Tiny drops tap gently against the glass. You smile, remembering how dangerous moisture once was for papyrus and parchment. Today, climate-controlled rooms quietly protect what ancient librarians could only hope to preserve. Modern technology has become another careful guardian. Yet, even now, preservation depends upon people paying attention. Machines help. Care matters more. The afternoon passes peacefully. Researchers compare handwriting styles. Others identify tiny differences between surviving copies of ancient texts. Sometimes a single missing word changes the meaning of an entire passage. Every detail receives thoughtful consideration. Patience remains the most valuable skill in the room. You stop before one particularly worn manuscript. Its edges are darkened. Several pages bear careful repairs completed centuries apart. One generation strengthened it, another repaired it again, a third carefully rebound it. Now it rests before you. The book itself has become part of history, not just because of what it says, because of everyone who refused to let it disappear. The rain outside gradually stops. Golden evening sunlight breaks through the clouds and fills the reading room with warm light. Dust motes drift lazily through the quiet air. For a moment, time itself seems wonderfully slow. You gently close the final manuscript. Its pages settle with the faintest whisper. No applause follows. Books rarely ask for applause. They simply ask to be opened. Tomorrow, your journey turns from individual manuscripts to the scholars who patiently rebuild entire lost libraries using scattered quotations, old catalogs, references in forgotten letters, and fragments gathered from across the world, proving that even vanished shelves can sometimes be reconstructed, one careful clue at a time. The final page settles softly beneath your fingertips. The conservation room grows quiet once more. Outside, the rain has washed the gardens clean, and fresh evening air drifts gently through a partially opened window. You leave the carefully protected manuscripts behind with a new appreciation. Every surviving page is extraordinary. But today, your journey becomes even more unusual. You are about to study books that no longer exist. At first, that sounds impossible. How can someone study a library that has vanished? The answer is surprisingly simple. Very carefully. One of the best established historical facts is that historians regularly reconstruct lost libraries by combining evidence from surviving book catalogs, quotations in other works, ancient letters, inventories, archaeological discoveries, ownership notes, and references written by later scholars. Sometimes a missing library leaves behind an excellent paper trail. Sometimes it leaves only whispers. You enter a peaceful research room where large wooden tables are covered with photographs, manuscript copies, excavation maps, handwritten notes, and carefully labeled fragments gathered from museums around the world. Nothing here looks dramatic, yet every sheet contains another clue. A historian welcomes you warmly before spreading several documents across the table. One page contains an ancient catalog listing titles once stored in famous collection. Another preserves a letter mentioning books borrowed decades earlier. A third quotes several lines from a manuscript that no longer survives. Individually, they seem unrelated. Together, they slowly begin rebuilding an entire library. Historians still argue whether certain famous lost works truly disappeared forever, or whether unidentified copies may still survive, unnoticed, inside private collections or overlooked archives waiting to be recognized. Hope remains an important research tool. So does patience. You watch as two researchers compare different medieval copies of the same ancient text. One version contains an extra paragraph. Another preserves a slightly different title. A third includes notes written in the margin by a reader hundreds of years ago. Every variation becomes another piece of the puzzle. History rarely hands over complete answers. It prefers riddles. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that scholars have occasionally identified lost ancient books simply because another author quoted several sentences while arguing against them. Ironically, criticism sometimes preserved works that otherwise would have vanished completely. Imagine surviving history because someone disagreed with you. That may be the most unexpected compliment of all. The researchers pin maps to a large board. Colored threads connect ancient cities: Alexandria, Pergamum, Nineveh, Baghdad, Nalanda, monasteries, desert caves. Knowledge never stayed in one place. It traveled with merchants, monks, diplomats, sailors, physicians, pilgrims, and curious students. Libraries were never truly isolated. They belonged to one enormous conversation. You remember the translators in Baghdad, carefully comparing languages, the monks patiently copying manuscripts, the scribes pressing wedges into clay. Every generation unknowingly helped future historians solve today's puzzles. Their ordinary work became extraordinary evidence. Nearby, a digital screen displays hundreds of manuscript fragments photographed at extremely high resolution. Researchers enlarge tiny details invisible to the naked eye: a faint ink mark, a damaged letter, a particular handwriting style. Modern technology joins ancient patience. Together, they accomplish remarkable things. One scholar quietly celebrates after matching two fragments preserved in different countries for centuries. Separated by thousands of kilometers, the pages finally meet again. No fireworks, only delighted smiles. Academic excitement continues to be wonderfully polite. Outside, evening birds settle into nearby trees. Their songs drift softly through the open window. The room itself remains almost silent, except for turning pages and the occasional quiet discussion. Libraries have changed. Their atmosphere has not. You walk toward another table, displaying reconstructed catalogs. Rows of titles appear beneath headings copied from surviving inventories. Some works still exist, others vanished long ago. Blank spaces remain where unknown books once stood. Oddly enough, those empty spaces feel just as meaningful as the completed entries. They remind you that history remains unfinished. A young researcher gently closes a notebook filled with years of careful observations. She smiles with quiet satisfaction. The library she studies may never be fully reconstructed. That does not lessen the value of every small discovery. Progress, like copying a manuscript, often happens one careful line at a time. The afternoon slowly fades into evening. Warm golden light stretches across the wooden tables. Dust drifts peacefully through the quiet room. You realize that rebuilding lost libraries is not really about recovering every missing page. It is about reconnecting scattered voices, helping forgotten conversations begin again. As you prepare to leave, the historian carefully returns every document to its protective folder. Nothing is rushed. Every clue deserves respect. Tomorrow, your journey reaches its final reflection before the peaceful farewell. You will discover why humanity continues rebuilding, preserving, copying, and protecting knowledge generation after generation, and why, despite every library that vanished, the story of learning itself has never truly been lost.
The folders close with a soft rustle. The researchers switch off their desk lamps one by one, and the quiet room gradually empties until only you remain, surrounded by centuries of patient investigation. Outside, twilight settles gently over the city. The last birds glide toward their nests, while the evening breeze carries the comforting scent of damp earth after the day's rain. You step outside and begin walking once more. There is no rush now. Your journey has carried you across thousands of years, from the clay tablets of Nineveh to the scrolls of Alexandria, from the parchment halls of Pergamum to the palm leaf manuscripts of Nalanda, through the translation rooms of Baghdad, the candlelit scriptoria of medieval monasteries, the silent caves of the desert, and the careful conservation rooms of the modern world. Every stop has quietly asked the same question: how do you keep memory alive? One of the best established historical facts is that nearly every civilization developed its own methods for preserving knowledge, adapting to local materials, climates, technologies, and traditions, while sharing the same fundamental goal: ensuring that important ideas could outlive the people who first recorded them. The methods changed, the hope remained the same. You find yourself walking through a peaceful botanical garden attached to a modern research library. It feels strangely familiar. Olive trees remind you of Alexandria. Tall cypress trees recall monastery courtyards. Lotus flowers bring back memories of Nalanda. The scent of rosemary briefly make you think of those quiet herb gardens where monks tended both plants and books with equal devotion. History has a wonderful habit of repeating itself in gentle ways. You sit on a wooden bench beside a small pond.
The surface of the water barely ripples. Dragonflies skim across it with effortless grace. Somewhere nearby, a fountain murmurs quietly. It sounds remarkably similar to the fountains you heard in ancient libraries thousands of years apart. Perhaps peaceful places naturally choose the same soundtrack. Historians still argue whether the greatest legacy of ancient libraries lies in the specific books they preserved, or in the enduring idea that knowledge itself deserves protection and public sharing. It is a debate with no easy answer. Perhaps both are equally important. After all, preserving books without readers serves little purpose, and eager readers without preserved books have little to explore. A family strolls slowly through the garden paths. A young child pauses to watch butterflies gathering around lavender blossoms. Nearby, an elderly professor quietly reads beneath a tree, turning each page with practiced care. Different generations, the same quiet curiosity. You smile. Some traditions never truly disappear. One quirky historical tidbit tells us that librarians throughout history have occasionally hidden amusing notes inside books, ranging from ownership marks to tiny personal messages, leaving unexpected glimpses of ordinary life tucked between serious scholarship. Imagine opening an 800-year-old manuscript only to discover the medieval equivalent of "Please return this book." Apparently, overdue library books have always been a universal concern. Some problems truly survive the centuries. You continue walking. The path curves gently beneath flowering branches. Each tree seems planted with thoughtful intention. Nothing grows randomly. Just like the shelves of the libraries you visited, every plant has its place. Gardens and libraries begin to seem remarkably alike. Both require planning, both reward patience, both grow richer with time. Neither can flourish through neglect. You remember the anonymous apprentice in Alexandria carrying scrolls, the monk whose tired hand continued writing by candlelight, the translator in Baghdad searching patiently for the perfect phrase, the archaeologist brushing dust from a forgotten tablet, the conservator separating two pages that had rested together for centuries. Most of history's heroes never expected recognition. They simply continued their work, quietly, faithfully. That realization feels comforting. Great achievements are often built from countless ordinary days. The sun begins lowering toward the horizon. Golden light filters through the trees, painting long shadows across the winding paths. The pond reflects the sky so perfectly that it almost seems to hold another world beneath its surface. You stop beside a stone engraved with a simple quotation about learning. Its words are modest. They do not promise perfect knowledge, only lifelong curiosity. That feels wonderfully appropriate. No library has ever contained everything. Each collection remained incomplete, yet each generation added another shelf, another manuscript, another careful copy, another preserved memory. Human knowledge has always been a conversation rather than a finished book. As evening deepens, the garden grows even quieter. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves overhead. The fountain continues its soft, steady rhythm. You realize that although countless libraries have vanished, the desire to ask questions, record discoveries, tell stories, and pass wisdom forward has never disappeared. Buildings fall, empires fade, shelves collapse, curiosity endures. You take one last slow walk through the garden before the path gently turns toward its final destination. Ahead lies a peaceful place where the journey can finally rest. There, beneath the quiet stars, you will gather together everything these lost libraries have whispered across the centuries, allowing their voices to fade softly into the night, with one final reflection before sleep. The garden path stretches quietly before you. Night has almost completely settled now. Above, the first stars appear one by one, exactly as they did above Nineveh, Alexandria, Pergamum, Nalanda, Baghdad, the lonely desert caves, and the quiet monastery cloisters you have visited along this long journey. They have watched every library rise. They have watched every library fade. Yet somehow they never seem hurried. You follow a narrow stone path toward a small hill overlooking the sleeping landscape. A single wooden bench waits beneath an old oak tree. Beyond it, fields shimmer softly beneath silver moonlight. The air is cool. The breeze is gentle. Everything feels wonderfully still. You sit down and look back, not with your eyes, but with your memory. The shelves of clay tablets in Nineveh, the endless scrolls of Alexandria, the parchment halls of Pergamum, the peaceful courtyards of Nalanda, the hidden caves where dry air quietly guarded forgotten manuscripts, the imperial archives of ancient China, the translators of Baghdad, the candlelit scriptoria where monks patiently copied page after page, the archaeologists brushing away centuries of dust, the conservators carefully turning fragile pages, the historians patiently rebuilding vanished collections from scattered clues. Each place seemed different, yet every one shared the same quiet promise: remember. One of the clearest historical facts is that the survival of ancient knowledge has never depended on a single civilization, language, religion, or empire. Instead, it has been the result of countless generations preserving, copying, translating, protecting, and rediscovering the work of those who came before them. Knowledge survives because people choose to care, again and again and again. Historians still argue whether humanity has lost the majority of all ancient written works, or whether more survives than we often imagine through copies, quotations, and rediscovered manuscripts. Perhaps we will never know. Perhaps that uncertainty is part of the story itself. One quirky historical tidbit reminds you that even today, forgotten manuscripts are occasionally rediscovered inside monastery libraries, private collections, or overlooked archives, proving that history still enjoys surprising us when we least expect it. Some books have become remarkably good at hide and seek. Fortunately, historians are remarkably patient seekers. You smile softly. The stars continue appearing overhead. A familiar pattern catches your eye. Perhaps an astronomer in Baghdad once studied those same stars. Perhaps a scholar in Alexandria traced them upon papyrus. Perhaps a monk glanced upward after extinguishing the final candle in the scriptorium. Different centuries, the same sky. You remember something that quietly followed you throughout this journey. No library ever stood alone. Every collection borrowed ideas from another. Every civilization inherited wisdom, added something new, and passed it onward. Knowledge has always traveled farther than armies. It crossed deserts, sailed oceans, climbed mountains, survived shipwrecks, outlasted kings. It rarely moved quickly, yet somehow it kept moving. The breeze gently stirs the branches above your bench. Leaves whisper softly together. For a moment, they almost sound like turning pages. You close your eyes and imagine all those ancient libraries existing together at once. No fires, no invasions, no collapsing walls. Only quiet rooms filled with readers, scribes patiently writing, teachers explaining, students asking questions, librarians carefully returning manuscripts to their shelves. It is a peaceful picture, perhaps an impossible one, yet a comforting one all the same. You think of the anonymous people history rarely names, the apprentice carrying scrolls, the gardener tending monastery herbs, the translator searching for exactly the right word, the traveler bringing a single manuscript across dangerous roads, the conservator repairing one torn page, the archaeologist celebrating a fragment no larger than a fingernail. Without them, there would be no story to tell. The moon climbs a little higher. Its pale light spreads gently across the quiet fields. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls once before falling silent again. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing rushes you forward. The journey has reached its natural resting place. You breathe slowly. The night answers with perfect calm. Now the world itself seems to grow softer. The breeze becomes quieter, carrying only the faint fragrance of grass and wildflowers across the hillside, while the stars continue their slow and patient journey overhead, asking nothing from you except that you notice them for a little while longer. The libraries you visited no longer feel like distant ruins. Instead, they become gentle companions resting somewhere in your thoughts, each one holding a small lantern whose light has traveled across centuries until it finally reached this peaceful evening. Perhaps that's the real miracle. Not that every book survived, not that every shelf remained standing, but that enough endured for one story to lead to another and another after that, until voices separated by thousands of years could still meet in quiet conversation. You realize that memory is less like a fortress and more like a garden. It must be tended, shared, watered with curiosity, protected with kindness. Every reader becomes another gardener. Every question plants another seed. Every preserved page allows something beautiful to bloom once again. So you let your thoughts drift gently through those gardens one final time, past olive trees and lotus ponds, past monastery herbs and palace courtyards, past shelves of clay, papyrus, parchment, palm leaves, paper, and leather. Each place fades slowly into the silver glow of the evening until only a quiet feeling remains. Gratitude for the books, for the people who protected them, for the countless unnamed hands that carried knowledge safely through time, and for the simple privilege of listening to their whispers tonight. The breeze grows softer still. The stars seem a little brighter. The world becomes wonderfully quiet. There is nothing left to do now except rest, knowing that while many libraries vanished, their spirit never truly disappeared. It lives wherever someone opens a book with curiosity, asks an honest question, shares a thoughtful idea, or quietly preserves a story for the next traveler who comes along. Sleep comes gently now, like the turning of one final page, and somewhere beyond the silence, those ancient libraries continue their endless conversation beneath the same timeless sky. As the journey comes to its quiet close, you allow the images to soften even further. The towering shelves, glowing lamps, shaded courtyards, whispering scriptoria, and moonlit ruins slowly dissolve into a peaceful haze. Nothing disappears abruptly. Instead, every place drifts away like mist lifting from a calm river at sunrise. The voices of scholars become distant murmurs. The scratching of quills fades into the sound of leaves moving in a light breeze, and the turning of ancient pages blends almost perfectly with the rhythm of your own slow breathing. There is comfort in knowing that not every mystery needs solving tonight. Some forgotten books may still rest beneath quiet hillsides. Some hidden chambers may remain sealed for centuries yet to come. Somewhere, an unopened manuscript may still be waiting patiently for careful hands and curious eyes. There is no hurry. History has always been patient, and for tonight, you can be patient too. Imagine the soft glow of a single lantern resting beside a shelf of books that have survived impossible journeys. Its light is warm, steady, and calm. Outside, the night stretches peacefully beneath countless stars that have watched every generation ask questions, tell stories, and dream of tomorrow. Those same stars now watch over you. May your thoughts become as gentle as falling leaves, your breathing as quiet as a still library before dawn, and your dreams as peaceful as a hidden garden where every forgotten story is safe, every page is carefully preserved, and every whisper of the past becomes a comforting lullaby carried softly into the night.